Hey everyone, welcome to the panel on building your venture at lightning speed. Hopefully in the next 55 minutes, you'll get everything you need to know about that specific topic. Before we kick off, why don't we whip around with some introductions for everyone? So my name is Nicholas Sando. I run the fintech team at Octopus Ventures. Octopus is one of the largest, I guess, and most active European seed to Series A funds. We've recently gone quite deep into insurance, and we started off by making direct consumer investments into the companies like Bought by Many, Buy Miles, Dead Happy, and that led us to start making more infrastructure investments like Vitesse, which does payments, and Sprout, which does claims technology. And recently we've announced 2 new funding rounds into Flocks, which is a fleet insurer, their Series B, which I was really excited about, and Kita as well, which is a carbon credit delivery insurance platform, which actually Richard led the first round on at Insurtech Gateway. So yeah, we look at pretty much everything in the insurance landscape. So why don't you kick off?
Hi everyone, my name is Professor Sneh Kemker. I'm a surgeon by background, but I recently just stepped down as the CEO of a company called SimplyHealth, which you may not have heard about, a very old, 150-year-old quasi-mutual company. But under the umbrella of SimplyHealth, I set up a £60 million venture capital vehicle, which made 6 meaningful investments into health assets over the last 6 months, and also set up a brand new model of business innovation called the Foundry, where we took a founder, a bunch of really cool ideas, and a bunch of capital, sprinkled a bit of magic dust, and set them off to grow brand new companies. So I'll be talking to you a little bit about that. Thank you for having me.
Richard Chattock. I'm the CEO for the Insurtech Gateway. We are a venture builder, first and foremost, and a fund manager for early stage, typically seed stage Insurtech companies. As Nick says, we've invested in a number of companies. We did the first round and Octopus did the second. But we invest globally, although predominantly in the UK, but we have businesses in UK, Europe, and the US. And we partner very closely with insurers and reinsurers for the benefit of our portfolio companies and for their benefits in terms of insights and access to the latest and most innovative companies.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer of PolicyExpert. PolicyExpert is focused on home insurance in the UK, more recently moved into the car insurance market as well. We've taken on the whole sort of value chain from front to back of home insurance and now car insurance. And it's great to be here today to talk to you a bit more about what we've been up to.
Martin.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Martin, Managing Director of Munich Re's venture building unit called 1880 Forward, where we build ventures for the company of Munich Re in spaces like insurance, cyber, and AI. We have a proud portfolio of 15 ventures created so far, and some of them are actually here. Affinity is one of them. You can meet them at our booth. CertAI is another one, so quite a few represented here. Before that, I spent my time not building ventures, but investing in them as part of a corporate venture capital arm of Allianz before that. And thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we've got a few topics we want to cover, and there's the Slido as well, which you can submit any questions, which we'll try and get to at the end. I think that probably the most appropriate place to start is really thinking about the teams when constructing these great ideas in insurance. And just to start, like we've looked at and backed some amazing companies where it's been all insurance founders or people who've never worked in insurance. And I guess Sneh, it would be great to basically understand what you think around crafting the right team when looking at Insurtech.
It's a great question. So let me start. I always hire people from outside insurance to come into insurance, especially in health insurance. Health insurance I see really as the laggard in the whole insurance world in many, many regards. And so whenever I get an approach or a candidate who's coming from retail, from FMCG, from knowing how to move stuff quickly, my ears prick up a lot more to that than it does to somebody who's been steeped in insurance speak for quite a long time. Partly because once you're in insurance speak, you tend to stay there, and it's quite hard to take yourself out of it and think differently. So generically, that's what we look for. But let me answer the question from two angles. One is from an investment angle. So when I'm investing in a business, what are the people that I look for? And second, from the build angle, because we're doing venture building, what are the three key roles that we want? So definitively, the person running the gig is super, super important. You need to have aggressive, ambitious, well-compensated, well-incentivized CEO. Straight behind that comes a CTO. Getting a technology infrastructure and a rapid development capability within that platform, that is an absolutely key hire, and making sure that you've got that leadership and then everything else that follows so they can interact with the companies quickly. And then third behind that, there's no doubt, is the CPO. It's got to be about product innovation, rapid lifecycle delivery. And those are the three key roles. So whichever angle I'm looking at it from, I tend to come in and look for those three key roles, and then the rest of it falls from there. But people from outside insurance generally like my fire a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, Richard, you've, I guess, incubated some incredibly disruptive insurance products. I mean, how do you think about the blend when you're, I guess, forming these early teams?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say there's such a thing as a perfect team.
Yeah.
I think the skills you need change over time. But we certainly are looking for, a little like Sneh, we're looking for founders who come with a deep domain knowledge and expertise. And that normally means they come from outside of insurance because they're trying to solve a problem for a set of policyholders or which are underserved or unserved entirely at the time we start. So generally from outside insurance, a lot of the attributes that Sneh mentioned. But then over time, what becomes more important is, can they build the business? They become business builders rather than anything else. And if the business is scaling and succeeding and growing, then that requires them to be very adaptive and come with a fair degree of humility to listen to advice and understand. So sort of kind of the obvious qualities you look for in people generally. But yeah, we start with often domain expertise and then the ability to be adaptive and grow with the business.
Right, awesome. Martin, Adam, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. We built two main businesses over the last 20 years. Simply Business, which was really built outside of the insurance domain initially, and then we brought people in. And PolicyExpert, which was very much people highly experienced in the market, and we gradually opened out from there with people bringing in all different skills from different units. So we've been about it both ways, and both have got their pros and cons. I think the main thing for us that we've seen over the years is there's a certain resilience that we've needed in any sort of building of either venture that we've done. And that for us is one of the key sort of characters that we've always looked for, whether they've got the knowledge of the domain or not. Yeah. There's a resilience that's needed on building any venture.
Yeah, I think I can only re-emphasize what my co-panelists said already. If you build ventures, you need entrepreneurs to build them, right? I think there's no doubt on this for sure. But as a corporate venture builder, I'm obviously also a big fan of that we bring together mixed teams in the sense of bring them together with subject matter experts. Ideally, you can find within your corporation, right? Because that can be an unfair advantage as a corporate venture builder that you can leverage in these ventures. So you need to, I think, find the combination of both. You said you call it domain expert, I call it subject matter expert, but you need that deep expertise, especially if you're operating in B2B venture building. You need to understand the market and the mechanics of that. I think that's very important.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. I guess, Martin, coming back to you on the next question, there'll probably be a few folks in the audience who, whether in their own organization, are thinking about launching a new venture or building new insurance products, or people joining venture building studios, all of the above. Like, what should people be looking out for? What are some sort of tips? What can you help them to, I guess, make the process, it's a difficult process, but make it slightly easier?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to put my answers in context, I'm responsible for a venture building unit within a corporate. Yeah. So my lessons learned come from that area, which might be slightly different for some of my co-panelists to some degree. But if you're building ventures within a corporation, I think there are a couple of lessons learned that at least I have. And I can say, summarize, it's pretty hard, right? And the reasons why you fail are actually much bigger than you can be successful, but there are lessons learned. I think the first one for me is you need to be very clear as a venture building unit why you exist. Sounds very simple and how you measure your success. But you need to be very clear. Do you want to be a strategic venture builder, that creates future business fields for your corporation? Or do you want to be a financial venture builder who creates financial return? Or a mix of both, potentially even, right? I think you just need to be very clear on what you want to be, and you need to be clearly aligned with your board members on that. Because if there's a different perspective, it's not going to work from the beginning. Second, for me, is the ventures we pursue, we always try to have a strong corporate unfair advantage in the things we pursue. That's particularly important for a corporate venture builder, because by design, you're probably slower than a regular startup within a corporation. So you need to find that unfair advantage. The things that we leverage, for example, in our ventures is typically data, right? Access to data sets that we have from our core business that we can leverage in new business models. It is access to our experts within the company. I mentioned this before. And maybe most importantly for us is it's access to clients. So from our core business, we have very good access to primary insurance companies and to board levels of primary insurers. And that's a strong asset for our venture. So again, we just acquired one venture. Usually we build them, but we acquired one from another incumbent. And they're just very happy that we can open them doors at board levels at primary insurers, which they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So there is this unfair advantage to leverage. And I think you need to be very disciplined on this, because otherwise I think you're successful at the corporate venture. Third topic for me is create a dedicated environment for a corporate venture builder. Because if you don't do that, there's obviously the risk that you spend more time fighting with your internal stakeholders, with communication, with HR, with finance, with legal, than with fighting for customers in the market. So I think that's obviously another one. And maybe a last one, which is similar to the CVC world, is your ventures that you build fail. Some will fail, that's for sure. So you build a portfolio like a VC, like a CVC, especially if you're more on the financially oriented side of things.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I mean, Richard, to jump to you, I mean, a lot of your companies, people read about them when they've raised a funding round, but like, what's the pre-work that goes in well in advance? Like when you have a concept or a thread of an idea, what are the sort of what does that first 6 months look like for your team?
We're working with the founders to make sure they can build a robust plan.
Yeah.
And make sure that they're selling it in an appropriate way, condensed in a really simple fashion.
Yeah.
I find most founders overcomplicate the story, and it makes it difficult for investors to understand in the really short space of time they're going to make that decision exactly what the proposition is. A really simple, easy to understand proposition wins out every time. And then we make sure that plan is built on the assumption that things won't go according to plan, right? There's no point in assuming, well, if you assume that you're going to hit your plan and you have funding for that plan, you're going to run out of money, because very few businesses actually hit that plan.
Yeah.
Things go wrong, and if they're not planning for that and have appropriate funding for that, then they probably won't raise money either, because investors will recognize that additional risk and not want to invest. So having a super clear proposition, building a robust plan that takes out and mitigates a lot of the risks, I think.
Yeah, cool. And Adam, you've been involved in some really great success stories. I'm sure with every success story, there's a couple failures along the way. Like, I think failing fast in this sort of, this world, and it's always, look, one more year, we can get that pricing strategy working, or, how do you know when it's working, when it's not working, when to call it?
I completely agree. We should fail fast. We've built a culture in all the businesses that we've built that it's okay to fail. Yeah. But if we're going to fail, let's do it quickly. I guess we've had to build a system that has the right KPIs in place and just the right culture to pick up on if things aren't going to plan, that it's okay to say, hang on a minute, we need to do something about this metric, or these things aren't looking quite as we planned. And just to be honest about that, not bury it away and just out that problem. We can then tackle it head on as opposed to sort of hiding away from it and walking away from it. But I completely agree that curveballs happen. Yeah. We're doing so much when you're digging a business out of the ground on so many levels, whether that's distribution, building a team, taking the investment. You can't keep your eyes on everything all the time to that level. Yeah. So to expect something to go wrong is key from what we've seen over the years, and to be open-minded to it when it happens, and build a good team that can actually deal with it when it happens. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sneha, were you going to say something?
No, it's just on the corporate venturing side. So there's a couple of aspects to it. What I've discovered, painfully, is trying to build a new organization within a corporation generally does not work. I think there are plenty of organizations that have tried it. We heard Inga this morning talking about the Aviva, was it Aviva, the platform that they had in Dalston. And the problem is what corporates try to do is reintegrate all of that beautiful new stuff into the old legacy business. And that never works. And so what I found actually was the mechanism to get it to work is just to be clear, this is separated, this is segregated, this is building businesses of the future. And if some of that magic flows back into the organization, great. If the culture begins to flow into the organization, great. Don't try and over-engineer that, because when you do, you fail.
Yeah, totally. One of the next topics I think would be interesting to talk about is when it is working, the optimal growth rate, if you will. And this is particularly on the MGA side, something we've seen with Octopus, is that we push our founders, and our founders are so ambitious. They're always trying to grow 2, 3x, 4x every single year. And what we found is there is an optimal growth rate, right, where it's not too fast, where you sort of degrade your pricing. And Sneha, I know you've had some experience with this. How should founders, particularly those maybe running MGAs or involved directly in the capacity provision, think about growth rate for their businesses?
So specifically in that category, you're quite limited by your customer. And actually, while you might have ambition to grow 4x and sell into the market, actually the sale cycle and the procurement cycle from the larger organization that you're selling into, especially if you're an Insurtech, is very, very challenging. And so the problem sits on both sides, is how do you optimize for that? So the one thing I know is that you've got to try and stick with the organization that you're selling to and work through their sales cycle. But what I say to Insurtechs is find those large companies that are providing you with the right platform for integration. So where you can get an avenue into the top and you can start having conversations with decision makers early on. I know that's tricky, but that does make a fundamental difference rather than coming in from the bottom up. But secondly, look at the tech environment. So one of the things that we did in SimplyHealth is that we built a tech environment that allowed small organizations to come along and figure out whether their tech could sit alongside ours, could integrate at the SDK API sort of level, and we could plug them in quickly. Because actually the sales cycle was prolonged because the tech department, the IT department said, no, it's going to take ages to get them integrated. Once they're in, we won't be able to get them out. And so we said, don't bother buying with them, whatever. If you can change that environment, you can give them a tech infrastructure whereby they can come and engage with your platform early and start selling on it, then the sales journey increases considerably. And the hint for Insurtechs is try and locate that and ask about that in the big corporations, the MGAs, the sales cycles that you're looking at.
Yeah. I mean, Richard, a lot of the early stage companies that we invest in, the revenue team and the underwriting team are separated for good reason. I mean, have you seen these tensions play out in some of the companies that you've worked with?
I think if you're an Insurtech selling a policy rather than the product to an insurer, selling a policy to a policyholder, what you need to be acutely aware of is you don't really know what the cost of that product is that you're selling, right? It's fairly unique. If you're selling cars, you know what it costs you to build the car. When you're selling an insurance policy, you often do not know, particularly if it's a brand new product or it's a brand new market you're addressing. And there are a lot of unintended consequences when you introduce technology or different routes to market in the set of policyholders you're acquiring as to what that cost of the policy will be. So to your point about separating teams, I'm not sure you need to separate the teams, but you need to establish a level of confidence around what the cost of the product is that you're selling. And you do not, if you can, right, and you can go out and sell 1 million policies on day one, it's reckless, right? Because if you don't know what it's going to cost you to pay for those policies, it could just blow your business up overnight. So certainly an element of prudence, establishing exactly what the cost of the product is you're selling, establishing, testing and iterating on that so you get the best price point, the best margin, and the most appropriate product for your consumers or policyholders. And then you can start to build the flywheel of momentum and grow the product. And hopefully in that process, you've been able to test your channels as well. So again, testing and iterating on the most effective way and cheapest way of acquiring those customers at the same time. So very much part and parcel of taking it initially a little bit slow. You will eventually get to that. Entrepreneurs are very ambitious. They want to do it all tomorrow. But prudence is the watchword.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I think for all the founders out there, you will always get, I founded my own company before joining Octopus Ventures, you just always get that pressure from everyone to grow faster, but you really know the implications for, I guess, reducing price or doing something, which could have a longer term impact. So trying to resist that to the best you can, I think, is really important. Adam, were you going to add anything to that?
The prudence piece and building the momentum really resonates with us. When we launched to the customers in 2011, we were a tiny player on the price comparison sites. 10 years later, we've built that momentum. We're a #1 panel share every month on home insurance, but we've built that confidence over time. We've built those baselines of different metrics that tell us along the way whether it's going right or whether we're overheating somewhere. Whether it's from a claim side, loss ratio, the team, we've got to carry the team with us, so just general servicing of policies, most of it's automated, but we've got to be able to grow the call centres at the same pace. So we've got all these different metrics that we've learned and found baselines for over time, but we were definitely not there at day one. So being prudent at day one, but building the confidence as fast as you can is key.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. In terms of growth, a clear and obvious growth channel is always internationalizing your business, right? And we've seen that go well with some of our insurance companies. We've seen it go really badly. And when I say badly, generally more expensive and took much longer than they thought. Martin, you've had some of your companies selling in multi-market. Like, how do you think about that stage, about now it's time to move to another market, and how do you sort of assess the ROI of that?
Yeah. Can I quickly come back to the other question just briefly? I think I would differentiate between Insurtech selling tech to incumbents, insurers, right? And Insurtech's taking risk, right? If you're Insurtech taking risk, you're kind of much in control of your own growth, right? You can drive that a lot yourself. But what we have seen, obviously, and Richard mentioned that, is that we had seen Insurtechs in this space that didn't have a properly calibrated underwriting model yet, but grew heavily, and then they saw the consequences a couple of years later, right? When claims start hitting in. For the Insurtech selling tech to incumbents, it's a very different game, of course, right? Because you're very much dependent on the sales cycle and finding the right entry doors into your incumbents. So we see that they are actually growing much less compared to the other Insurtechs because the sales cycle are so much longer, and they're strongly dependent on getting the right door into the game.
Yeah, I'll pause the international question though, because just to double click on the sales cycles, this is a recurring theme I see with a lot of our B2B insurance businesses when they go out to raise future funding, is people broadly assume that anyone selling into large insurers for good reason is going to have a long sales cycle, and it's interesting because I've chatted with tier one insurers and I've go, your peer is using this product, would that quicken your adoption? And they go, no. We're not in the business of taking risk, ironically, right? We will look at this individually and assess it, and that, someone else using it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to adopt it quicker. For companies that you've all worked with, so open question, that have got the sales cycle really right, like, are there any things that they've done in particular which is unique to them?
Can I start with one quick observation, is that I think it's incumbent on the insurance industry and not on the Insurtech industry to change this paradigm, to change this dynamic. Because, the comments about insurers being asleep at the wheel, this is part of the insurance, the big corporates being asleep at the wheel. If you don't have a platform for rapid assimilation of the startup innovation environment that's going to bring much better things to your company and your customers, you're the one who's going to lose in the long term. Because the big ones who are really moving on are providing that platform and providing that integration to allow for a shorter sales cycle, allow for better integration, because it works for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think the winning out model and the incumbent change that needs to happen is at the big insurer level.
Yeah.
Can I build on this?
Yeah.
Because I know we discussed to whom should you sell and buy to as an Insurtech, right? And we said, would you go top down or bottom up, right? If you approach an incumbent, and I think maybe it depends on the product you're selling, right? If you're selling a product where insurers are used to procure this for years, or you have a clear buying persona, you can go directly to that. However, in all the things we do, and I'm sure you guys as well, if you have an innovative solution, right, that is not common within a corporation yet, I would always go top down, right?
Yeah.
Because you need someone as an advocate within the organization that sees the bigger vision that you can enable within the corporation, that opens the doors for you within the incumbent.
Yeah. And what are I think top down, I completely agree, but that's one of those easier said than done. What are some things that people can do to really actually approach that way of selling if they don't necessarily have the network in their own Rolodex?
Well, I'm not encouraging to write emails to our group CEO now, but whenever I would be an Insurtech, right, I would do that, right, because all the things that land on his table land on the next table down the chain, right, and you better make sure you look at them because it comes from your group CEO. So it's simple.
One of the things that we've encouraged our founders to do is use an advisory board. Right, so you create an advisory board, and we call it weaponizing your advisory board. And while everyone will come to a nice dinner, have great wine, right? That's a pretty easy gift from you. And on the flip side, you can basically leverage their network. So for those folks who necessarily maybe don't have those networks on their own, setting up an advisory board is a really effective way to do that. We found.
I find that works very well for me. I'm quite easy on these things, and I always like a nice glass of wine and a nice dinner. But when there's an advisory board member there as well, as someone senior who you've worked with previously, that adds that level of influence, which is quite emphatic. But the thing is, actually, what it comes down to is, so as a CEO, what's going to make me shine? What's going to make my business shine? So if I'm not finding innovation from within the organization, I've got to find it from elsewhere. So if I get people who are presenting me with ready-made solutions and ideas that I think I can rapidly assimilate and integrate, that's actually going to be my source of innovation, source of breathing new life into my own company. So it's even just the excitement of that, the bringing of a new product or service, which I know it would take me absolutely ages to develop.
Yeah.
And if that's presented in the right way, ideally with the right glass of wine and the right introductory partner, it works.
But what's your preferred glass of wine, just for those in the audience?
So 65 Lafite, I'll have you know. So no.
I said it was a cheap way. That cheap when the snake's coming. Adam, what about the international piece, right? I'm sure you've had these temptations the whole time.
We have.
Made mistakes, got it right. How do you think about this?
So we've had international pressure for years in both businesses,
Yeah.
And we've never done it. We've always stayed focused on the UK, and now we're back in that cycle again of assessing is international right for us. It's a fine balance. We would have to evolve our team with some experience of having internationalized elsewhere first, because we don't have it internally.
Yeah.
And I think this time is probably the time where we will give it a go when the market cycle's right. But like I say, we need to evolve the team and fail fast if we're going to do it. I think there is a niche for us off the back of home insurance to be able to go overseas, possibly in on more of a contents angle initially, because we could service a lot of the claims in the UK and sort of piggyback on some of the ecosystem we've built here. And then as and when that evolves, we might relocate some of that and build it back out in that territory. But it's one that personally I'm really nervous about, internationalization. I think the market in the UK is huge, not just in the current products, but in the suite that we could build into in personal lines. And I think it could be a huge distraction. On the flip side, from an enterprise value, I think it's a huge opportunity. So we've got to work it out along the way.
Yeah. Richard, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting listening to the obviously your thought process over time as to whether you do this, and I think it is a different decision for, it's horses for courses, right? Personal lines is particularly unique to each individual market. There are different routes to market in different countries. Some countries are a lot more competitive than others, and a lot of the perils and exposures are very different from one country to another. So there's a lot of pitfalls, I think, for internationalizing on personal lines that are less severe or easier to overcome in, say, business lines, B2B or B2B2C type channels. So we certainly have, a lot of our businesses have started in the UK because kind of where we are, and we have regulatory permissions and things here. But once we've tested the product and we know it works and we know it's profitable, then we look for the best market to sell that product in, and often that best market may not be the UK. So it may be we should take this to the US, or we should take this to Europe, and the metrics will be more attractive there. Or we've even got companies that have launched simultaneously Europe, UK, Canada, and the US all in one go. But it's a very corporate. It's a very corporate. They're doing incredibly well, but it's a very corporate product. So they're selling to large corporates ultimately, and those large corporates basically look the same in every country in the world. So it's the same business decision for them. So a much easier product to internationalize.
Yeah, Martin, I'm sure you've got some.
Yeah, I totally understand Adam's story and thinking, and again, for the risk-taking Insurtechs, I think that makes total sense, right? Because every market is so different. Also, it's a regulated industry, right? So it's quite different country by country. But again, if you have different product, if you have a tech product, we talked about platforms in this previous panel. Also, if you're in a marketplace business, right, by nature your product might easier scale across countries because it's less dependent on the country specifics. And I think if you're if you have a niche customer segment you're serving to, right, you may need to move into other markets quickly, right, in order to show the growth that you need.
Yeah. To give an example from our portfolio, so ManyPets, which is the largest MGA in our portfolio, they wanted to launch in America, and they currently are live in America. But before that, they did a launch in Sweden. And Sweden was never going to be a big money-making market for them just because of the size, but the pet insurance adoption was really high, and they used it as a test bed, actually, to understand what is involved in that scaling process and that internalization process. And it's worked really well. But they also, they hired McKinsey. They did a huge amount of work before launching into America because they thought America had a lot of parallels to Europe, and it does in some ways, but it's a completely different beast, just from the regulatory side alone. So I think, making your decisions based on as much prep work as you can do, obviously, is the way to go.
Just one quick comment on that, Nick. So there's nothing worse in a follow-on round when you made an initial investment into a company, it's done well in one geography, and then they come and they say, we're going to conquer the States. Yeah. And they come with a massive ask and looking for a big Series B or whatever, and they've got no proof points of having expanded that internationally. It's much better to get a little bit of mezzanine financing, whatever else it requires. Go and prove yourself out in one state. So there's a company I invested in called Scan.com. What they've done is they've gone to America, but they've gone to one specific geography, to Atlanta, and in Atlanta, they've proven out their model. I'm now much more likely to be able to fund them into the next stage of their iteration. Or someone like, I tell you, quite interesting, there's an organization called Peppy, which is doing menopause services. What they did very cleverly is they've leveraged all of their relationships from the corporates that they built in the UK in a relatively small environment, and then used them to go over to the American parent or partner, and then go and hit that corporate as well. And that's been quite a clever model that's worked.
That's smart. Okay, look, well, we've got 5 minutes left, and I said we would get to some of the audience questions, so this is the time for them. So the first one is, what are the main strategic KPIs used by the parent company to assess the success of its strategic corporate venture building unit?
All right, I'll give it a start. That's a tough one, but a very important one. So what we use is a mix out of financial and qualitative KPI, I would say. And if I'll say how success looks like, I don't mean like interim success. So I have created a portfolio of 15 ventures in this stage. So this is just showing progress, but it's not an outcome-oriented KPI. So outcome, we mean enterprise value created over time. So we invest in cohorts, and the cohort has a certain amount of money, and we say we want to have a multiple of that money coming out of the portfolio after a certain amount of time. So mimicking what a VC does. So it's return over invested capital is the financial number we have. In addition to that, we have a certain, let's say, qualitative criteria in the sense of partnerships enabled with the core business, right, or contact points with the core business. So it's a mix out of some harder to measurable qualitative criteria and a very hard financial multiple over invested capital criteria.
Yeah, brilliant. Anyone have anything else to add to that? It's quite comprehensive.
Just in the first year, it's about milestones rather than outcomes. Building the team, building the product, having clear definition of your market and how you're going to go after it.
Okay.
That's the first year.
So this one was, how do you perceive the risk of investing in a first-time versus second-time founder? The first-time founder maybe has higher drive, more to prove. The second-time founder maybe lower drive, but also has the benefit of experience. So not an easy call, but how do you both think about that?
I mean, I think the perceived wisdom is that you'd always take the second-time founder. You learn a lot in the first journey, and we see a lot of first-time founders who failed, but then still attract plenty of interest and money as a second-time founder. I mean, Adam Newman being a case in point, right? I think he raised $300 million for his next venture at pre-seed, right? So people can see, they get the vision and the drive and the ability of that founder to execute and what they've achieved in that first time round.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think there's also a price consideration. You tend to pay a lot more for a second-time founder, and equally, they don't have all the best ideas. So there's plenty of opportunity for first-time founders too.
Yeah, definitely. Adam, you got some thoughts around that?
My personal journey was, we learned a lot on the first gig.
Yeah.
A lot. And were we any sort of less passionate about the second one? I think, if anything, we were more so. We'd sort of cracked into something, we'd seen an opportunity via the first venture we built, and we were even more passionate about the second one, with all the insight that we learned from the first one. So I can see how there's pros and cons of both, but for me, I'd go second round every time, and I don't think they're any less passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. In terms of themes or areas that I guess all of you four are really excited about now, where you're putting resource, what you're reading, maybe I'll go and give each one of you a chance to talk about this. Martin, why don't you kick off?
Well, everyone's saying this year is going to be the year of AI, and that's a big topic for us already. How can we leverage the technology, across the value chain of insurance, right, to have further process efficiency and efficiency in underwriting. At the same time, we're also looking at it from an angle, how can we reduce bias in algorithms, right, by democratizing access to data and enabling data marketplaces potentially, right, in the sense that allows for more unbiased, ethical AIs to be created. So that's a topic we'll deeply look into this year.
Awesome. Sounds exciting. Adam?
I completely agree with the AI piece. We've done various initiatives internally, but they're hard to sort of really bring to life, and some work, some don't. But I still think there's a lot to go at on the AI and the machine learning side. And the other one for me would be the whole embedded piece. I don't think we've cracked embedded insurance yet. And even for us as a direct-to-consumer play, mostly online, I think there's opportunity in that channel, even within house insurance, to really embed some true value-add products and shake up that market a bit. But we've not done it yet. We're on that journey. But I think that's a really interesting space across the market at the minute.
Yeah, totally agree with you that. We've done a couple embedded insurance investments recently, and really excited by that distribution model. Richard, what about you?
Yeah, we got a particular interest in climate-related businesses. We think there's obviously a very strong tailwind for a lot of these businesses. They're largely white spaces, with new groups of policyholders. We've invested recently in Kita, which is a good example of that, in that it's ensuring the delivery risk of carbon credits. So an entirely new space, is growing extraordinarily fast, and there's a huge pent-up demand. So we certainly see that as a particularly attractive space. And then just data-driven businesses, we continue to like, always have done. Anything that gives you the unfair advantage because you've got some proprietary data or knowledge that you can utilize and continue to outcompete over time. So.
Brilliant.
Two perspectives from me. The first is I'm going to answer it slightly differently because I'm thinking about health insurance. So all health insurers are now moving away from just being financial services companies and trying to be health services or health solutions companies. And so there are themes that come along. During COVID, it was mental health. Very recently, it's been about female health. The next wave is going to be about family planning and family building type of health. And then it's going to go into LGBTQ plus health and specific health segments. And so what health insurers are looking for is that ecosystem, that suite of services. So that's what we're going after. And then the second way I'll answer it is it's not impact, but it's responsible investing, where your equally competing outcome metrics are financial success and capital return, but also impact on society in a measurable way, something that is actually going to move the needle and drive a purpose behind a company and is not just all about financial and shareholder return.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, there you have it. So if any of your ideas fall into those categories, don't let them leave the room until you've taken their business cards. But it'd be nice if you could all join me in thanking these panelists today. I think it was a really